In a world intoxicated by noise, where opinions are hurled before reflection and voices shout over each other to be heard, the ancient art of silence has all but vanished. Yet the Stoics remind us that silence is not emptiness, it is not weakness, it is wisdom, deliberate, firm, and purposeful. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, once warned that it is better to trip with the feet than with the tongue. A simple truth, yet often ignored in a society addicted to speaking first and thinking later. How many regrets are born from words unleashed in haste, in anger or in pride, and how often could peace or clarity have been preserved with a moment of measured silence? To the Stoic mind, silence is not the absence of speech, it is the presence of mastery. It is the discipline of choosing stillness when the world demands noise. It is the quiet strength of the man who knows that control over the tongue is the beginning of control over the self. In this video, we will explore 9 pivotal moments where silence does not merely serve as avoidance, but stands as an act of courage, clarity, and inner power. These are not just strategies for peace, they are declarations of character. Whether facing unfair criticism, arrogance, anger, or loss, the Stoic path shows us how silence can guard the mind, preserve virtue, and elevate the soul. So before we begin, ask yourself, in the last week, how many words did you spend carelessly? How many moments could have been redeemed by restraint? Let us walk together through these 9 moments of Stoic silence, not as an escape from conflict, but as a path toward personal mastery. For as Marcus Aurelius said, "Don't waste time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." 1. The quiet power amid boastful noise. There is a peculiar discomfort that arises when we find ourselves in the presence of boastfulness. When someone driven by their need to be seen fills the room with tales of their achievements, their possessions, their accolades. Perhaps it's at a workplace gathering or a family reunion or among friends where one voice begins to rise above the others, swelling with self-congratulation. In that moment, the ego within us stirs. It whispers, "Respond. Show them you are not lesser. Prove your worth." But to the Stoic, this moment is not an invitation to compete, it is an opportunity to abstain. It is a moment to anchor oneself in the virtue of sophrosony, moderation, self-restraint, and to understand that the need to declare your value is often a sign you doubt it yourself. The Stoic response to bragging is not to one-up, not to counter, but to remain still. Why? Because silence in the face of arrogance is not submission, it is elevation. It declares without words that your identity is not a performance, it is rooted in something deeper, something untouchable by external comparison. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor-philosopher, reminds us, it is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about those things. When others boast, it is not their words that agitate us, it is our judgment that we are being diminished by them. But how could their words reduce the man who is content with his character? Imagine you are standing in a circle of colleagues, and one begins listing recent promotions, purchases, accolades. The air thickens with performative pride. Most feel compelled to participate, to match the tone, to reclaim space. But the Stoic breathes, listens and smiles gently. He chooses not to speak, not because he lacks accomplishments, but because he does not need applause. His silence is not empty, it is full of confidence, grounded in self-respect. In Letters to Lucilius, Seneca warns of the vanity of chasing recognition. He writes, "Let us not envy those who are called happy, but those who can truly be happy without being called so. To sit in silence while another boasts is to live this wisdom. It is to say, I am not defined by what you see. I am defined by what I am, even in stillness." Moreover, silence in such moments protects something precious, your peace. It guards you from being lured into comparison, which, as the Stoics teach, is the thief of tranquility. Comparison is born from insecurity. Silence is born from sufficiency. In this world, where so many shout to prove they are worthy, the one who remains quiet speaks the loudest. His dignity, his poise, his restraint, these are his reply. And over time, it is the one who speaks least of his greatness who will be remembered for it most. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt the need to prove something? Did it come from a place of fullness or a sense of lack? Would your silence have served you better than your story? The Stoic chooses to let his actions speak, his character radiate, and his peace remain untouched. He knows that the man who can be calm in the shadow of boastfulness is the one who walks freely, unburdened by comparison, unmoved by noise. So the next time you find yourself surrounded by self-praise and verbal victory laps, remember this: your silence is not weakness, it is sovereignty. It is proof that you no longer need to be seen to know who you are. 2. Choosing silence over the storm of anger. Anger often arrives unannounced. It surges like a tempest through the soul, demanding immediate release through harsh words, clenched fists, or cold withdrawal. It blinds reason, distorts judgment, and leaves behind wreckage in the form of broken relationships, regretful memories, and self-inflicted shame. Yet the Stoic knows it is not the moment of offense that defines the man, but how he conducts himself within the fire of provocation. To those who walk the Stoic path, anger is not an enemy to be feared. It is a force to be studied, understood, and most importantly, governed. Epictetus advised, "Keep silence for the most part, or if you speak, say only what is necessary and in few words." In moments of rage, this silence becomes more than courtesy. It becomes a discipline of self-command. Imagine a day at work. A colleague's carelessness causes you hours of unnecessary labor. Your pulse quickens. The mind conjures accusations, ready to be hurled like spears. You feel justified after all. Your time was disrespected, your energy wasted. But the Stoic does not ask what is justified. He asks what is wise. And wisdom begins in the pause between impulse and action. Silence, in this context, is not repression, it is control. It is the conscious act of stepping back, breathing deeply, and granting yourself the space to respond rather than react. It is in this pause that anger loses its power and reason reclaims its throne. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it?" This is a truth we often discover too late. Words spoken in fury cannot be unsaid. Reactions fueled by rage often lead to outcomes we later must mend. But the Stoic, guided by inner clarity, sees the path ahead and chooses not to feed the flames. Does this mean you must remain passive in the face of injustice or harm? Absolutely not. Stoicism is not passivity, it is principled strength. Choosing silence does not mean avoiding confrontation. It means ensuring that when you do speak, your words are deliberate, not destructive. It means reserving your voice until your mind is calm enough to wield it with precision. The Stoic understands that anger often conceals deeper truths, wounded pride, unfulfilled expectations, fear. To master anger is to excavate these roots, to see clearly and to redirect energy not into retaliation, but into correction, understandance, or transcendence. Reflect on the times you've let anger lead. What was the cost? Did it heal the wound, or did it deepen it? And then consider this. What might have happened had you remained silent just long enough to breathe, to reflect, to regain your center? The discipline of silence in moments of rage is not easy. It requires strength. It demands humility. It calls you to surrender your immediate craving for emotional release in exchange for a deeper, longer-lasting power, mastery over self. And that, as the Stoics have long taught, is the foundation of true freedom. So the next time anger rises like a wave, threatening to crash through your chest and out your mouth, remember, you are not a slave to emotion. You are its sculptor. Let silence be your chisel and carve from that moment a better version of yourself. 3. Silence as strength in the face of unfair criticism. There will come a time, perhaps many, when your actions, your words, or even your silence will be met with judgment. Not the kind of feedback that refines, but criticism that wounds without cause. It is in this moment that the untrained man erupts in defense, his pride lashing back to reclaim dignity. But the Stoic stands still. He listens not to defend himself, but to understand what lies beneath the surface. He knows that reaction is easy, mastery is rare. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If something external causes you distress, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." In other words, the insult does not wound unless you grant it entry. The Stoic filters the criticism not through ego, but through reason. He asks, is there truth in this? If so, let it refine me. If not, let it pass through me like wind through branches felt, but not held. Unfair criticism is a mirror. Sometimes it reflects the insecurity of the critic more than the flaws of the criticized. A Stoic does not fear this mirror. He simply chooses not to mistake distortion for clarity. Epictetus taught that we are not disturbed by events themselves, but by the meanings we assign to them. The Stoic strips those meanings bare, separating insult from impact and identity from accusation. Imagine this. You lead a project at work and despite your effort, a superior harshly condemns your outcome. The room watches. Your reputation hangs in balance, but instead of defending with haste or biting back, you pause. You breathe, you listen, not because the words are correct, but because your composure is more valuable than vindication. You thank them if necessary and walk away with your self-command intact. What have you lost? Nothing. What have you gained? Everything. Dignity, discipline, and inner control. Silence here is not weakness. It is a declaration that your worth is not up for auction. It tells the world, and more importantly yourself, that your peace is not hostage to someone else's opinion. Stoicism does not ask you to suppress emotion, but to guide it. You are not a stone, but a sword held in restraint. When unfair words are thrown your way, your silence becomes your shield, your posture your reply. The wise man does not need to prove his value, he lives it. He does not protest the insult, he transcends it. This moment of unfair criticism is a test, not of your intellect, but of your soul's stability. Will you meet it with noise or with noble quiet? Will you let your character speak louder than your tongue? As Marcus Aurelius commanded, don't waste time debating what a good man should be. Be one. Let silence be your response. Let your discipline be your answer. And let your growth be the final word. 4. Embracing the silence of grief with Stoic grace. There are few silences more profound or more painful than the silence that follows loss. It is not merely the absence of noise, but the deafening echo of something or someone no longer there. Whether it is the passing of a loved one, the end of a relationship, the collapse of a dream, or a chapter of life closing, grief leaves behind a quiet so vast that it swallows words whole. But even here, especially here, Stoicism offers light, not to erase the pain, but to illuminate the path through it. The Stoics never denied sorrow. They never claimed that a wise man should not feel. What they taught was mastery, not over emotion itself, but over the response we choose to make from within it. As Seneca said, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. Loss, to the Stoic, is not merely suffering, it is sacred ground, a testing place of the soul's strength, a furnace in which character is either consumed or refined. Consider the words of C.S. Lewis, who, though not a Stoic, spoke a deeply Stoic truth. "The pain I feel now is the happiness I had before. That's the deal." In that simple line is the essence of acceptance. Love and loss are not opposites, they are companions. To have loved deeply is to have opened yourself to the possibility of loss, and to lose something or someone truly dear is to have lived fully, courageously, without detachment from what made life meaningful. In moments of grief, the Stoic does not rush to speak. He does not mask sorrow with empty positivity or distract himself with noise. He chooses silence, not the silence of denial, but the silence of reflection. He turns inward, not to escape the world, but to face it more clearly. He lets the pain be what it is, a teacher, a purifier, a revealer of what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius, who buried children, friends, and comrades, wrote in his Meditations, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." To contemplate loss is not morbid, it is grounding. It brings us back to the present. It reminds us that time is precious, people are irreplaceable, and every day is a chance to live with integrity and gratitude. Grief then becomes a doorway. Through it we see more clearly the impermanence of all things. The Stoic does not cling to what must pass, nor does he harden his heart to avoid future sorrow. He accepts transience with open eyes. He mourns with dignity. He loves without possession, and when loss arrives, as it will, he receives it not with resistance, but with reverence. Ask yourself, when have you faced loss? Did you allow the silence to teach you, or did you try to outrun it, to distract yourself from what needed to be felt? What would happen if, the next time sorrow visits, you welcomed it as a messenger, not of doom, but of truth? The Stoic approach to grief is not to suppress tears, but to honor them, to sit in the quiet aftermath and ask, what is this pain trying to reveal? And then, without flinching, to listen. It is in this stillness that healing begins, not through speeches or explanations, but through presence, through the discipline of being with what is, through the courage to say nothing and simply feel. So when loss enters your life, as it does for all who live, remember, you are not broken by grief, you are being reshaped by it. Let silence be the space where your sorrow becomes understanding, where your emptiness becomes expansion, where your heart, though wounded, opens wider than before. The Stoic walks through grief not with armor, but with acceptance, and in doing so he discovers a strength that no loss can take away, the strength of a soul that knows its place in the great order of things and bows before it with peace. 5. The Stoic silence amid false accusations. There are few forces more corrosive than a rumor whispered in the shadows, half-truths wrapped in malice, repeated until they echo louder than the facts. These falsehoods are not only damaging to reputation, they provoke the deepest instincts within us to defend, to argue, to shout over the lies, until our truth is heard. But for the Stoic, the question is never, what must I say? It is, what is within my control, and what is not. When false accusations arise, they often bring with them a temptation more dangerous than the rumor itself, the need to prove oneself innocent in the court of gossip. But the Stoic knows that silence is not surrender, it is a strategy. It is the armor of a man who does not chase shadows, but instead walks in the light of his own integrity. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The Stoic does not waste his breath fighting what is outside his command. He places his attention where it matters most, his own conduct. Let others speak, let the crowd murmur. The truth, like oil in water, will always rise to the top. Consider the story of a teacher falsely accused in a small town. As rumors grew like wildfire, she did not fuel them with reaction. She did not rush to plead her case to every voice in the market. She chose silence, not out of fear, but from strength. She continued her work, held fast to her principles, and allowed time and integrity to expose the truth, and in doing so, she became not just a teacher, but a living lesson in Stoic poise. Epictetus gave us a piercing insight when he said, "If evil is spoken of you and it is true, correct yourself. If it is a lie, laugh at it." Why laugh? Because a lie only holds power if you carry it. And when you refuse to give it weight, when you do not react, do not defend, do not dignify it with desperation, it collapses under its own emptiness. Silence in these moments becomes a mirror. It reflects not your fear but your discipline. It shows the world that you are not governed by rumor nor driven by the approval of the crowd. You are anchored in something deeper, the unwavering knowledge of who you are and the values you uphold. And what happens to the lie when you don't chase it? It withers. Its energy dies in the void of your indifference. But if you respond with urgency, you feed it, you make it real, not because it is true, but because you validate it with your attention. This doesn't mean that we should never clarify or speak the truth, but timing matters, posture matters. The Stoic knows that words are only worth speaking when they emerge from a place of inner stillness, not emotional panic. And sometimes, the greatest refutation is not rebuttal, it is consistency. It is a life lived with such dignity that no false word can cling to it. Ask yourself, if someone spread a lie about you, would you crumble trying to explain your innocence, or would your very character be the loudest rebuttal? In the age of digital whispers, where one rumor can reach thousands in seconds, the Stoics' response remains timeless. Stay composed. Remain silent when necessary. Let your actions outlive the lie. Let your patience expose the truth. For the man who does not flinch under falsehood is the one the world cannot sway. And in that calm defiance, there is a message louder than any defense. You may lie about me, but you cannot make me lie to myself. 6. Stoic detachment in the midst of gossip. There is a unique sting in hearing your name passed around in hushed tones, reshaped and repurposed in ways you never intended. Gossip, insidious and subtle, does not always attack directly. It whispers, poisons and corrodes slowly, like a quiet rust on one's reputation. It provokes a desire to defend, to explain, to speak out in a flurry of clarifications. But the Stoic asks a deeper question: is it necessary? In the realm of Stoic thought, few things are more valuable than inner tranquility, and few things more unworthy of that sacrifice than the need to refute every rumor. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who wronged you." When others spread falsehoods, the Stoic does not lower himself to join their noise. He lets his life, not his words, be his answer. Gossip only thrives when it is fed. It is oxygenated by reaction. The moment you begin to chase it, to argue with it, to shout against it, you dignify it, you give it substance. The Stoic, on the other hand, starves it with silence. He understands that the momentary satisfaction of defense is not worth the erosion of peace. Imagine a leader in a community, committed to a just cause, suddenly surrounded by whispers that question her integrity. She does not run door to door with denials. She does not hold press conferences to clear her name. She stays focused on her mission. And in time, the rumors, starved of contradiction, deprived of reaction, fade like mist in the sun. What remains? Her work, her clarity, her example. Seneca reminds us, "A good character, when established, is not at the mercy of words." This is the heart of the Stoic posture toward gossip. If your life reflects your principles, what need is there for defense? If your integrity is intact, no amount of slander can undo it. Words may circulate, but they cannot penetrate a soul that is undisturbed by external opinions. This is not to say that truth does not matter, it does. But the wise understand that timing and presence matter more. When falsehood is met with calm, its power begins to dissipate. When it is met with frantic rebuttal, it finds new fuel. The Stoic chooses silence not to avoid the truth, but to guard it from being dragged through the mud of petty exchange. Consider your own experience. Have you ever been misunderstood, misrepresented, or judged unfairly by people who did not know the full story? Did your explanation change their minds, or merely feed their curiosity? The Stoic learns to accept this simple truth. Not every battle is worth fighting, and not every accusation requires a response. The world will talk, let it. The wise man continues to walk his path. Silence, in these moments, becomes a moral mirror. It tells others, I do not need your validation to remain upright. And more importantly, it tells yourself, my peace is not for sale. We live in a time where visibility is currency and public perception is treated as reality. But Stoicism urges us to abandon this illusion. What people say is not who you are. What people believe is not what defines you. What endures is how you live, how you carry yourself, and what legacy your actions leave behind. Let them speak. Let the wind howl. You are the mountain. You are the stillness. You are the one who knows that truth, undisturbed, always outlasts noise. 7. Stoic grace in the face of ignorance. There are few trials more subtle, yet more constant, than navigating the ignorance of others. Not the ignorance born from innocence, but the kind that clings stubbornly to illusion, the kind that declares opinion as fact, defends error with arrogance, and mocks clarity when it threatens comfort. It is in these moments that many feel the urge to correct, to debate, to raise their voice, as if truth shouted louder will pierce the fog of confusion. But the Stoic knows truth is not always served by volume, and ignorance is not always cured by confrontation. In fact, often it is silence, not speech, that reveals wisdom most clearly. Consider the example of Galileo Galilei, the astronomer who stood before the ignorance of his time. His discoveries, grounded in observation, reason, and science, were met not with open minds, but with condemnation. He was silenced, but he did not rage. He did not hurl insults at his critics. He bore the weight of error around him with quiet strength, knowing that truth does not require shouting to remain true. This is the Stoic stance, to meet ignorance not with ego, but with equanimity. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not external events. Realize this and you will find strength. Ignorance, like weather, surrounds us, but whether we let it penetrate our peace is a choice. When someone speaks out of error, misunderstanding, or pride, the Stoic does not take it personally. He does not rush to correct merely to prove himself right. Instead, he asks, is this the right time? Is this person ready to hear? And will my silence serve the greater good more than my words? Silence here is not passivity, it is precision. It is the wisdom to know when speech is futile, and when the most powerful reply is none at all. The Stoic does not correct to win arguments. He speaks only when truth has a chance to take root, and when it doesn't, he walks away not in defeat, but in dignity. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, where people double down on falsehoods to protect fragile egos, the silent man stands apart. Not because he lacks knowledge, but because he has nothing to prove. His calm unsettles the ignorant more than confrontation ever could. It exposes their chaos simply by refusing to match it. Think about your own life. How many times have you wasted your energy trying to explain something to someone who did not want to understand? How often has your peace been disturbed, not by the ignorance itself, but by your insistence on forcing clarity upon deaf ears? Epictetus warned us, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. And so the Stoic does not cast pearls before those who cannot recognize their value. He saves his energy for those willing to reason, those prepared to listen, those humble enough to receive. When faced with ignorance, the Stoic asks, "Can I live my truth quietly, without having to convince the world of it?" If the answer is yes, he continues in peace. His silence is not a void, it is a signal. It says, "I will not enter the arena of confusion, because I know who I am, what I believe, and why I walk this path." True understanding requires more than information, it requires readiness. Until then, silence becomes the highest form of wisdom. It is the refusal to sacrifice your serenity on the altar of another's blindness. So when you find yourself surrounded by ignorance, whether in debate, in institutions or in daily life, remember, you are not here to convert the unready, you are here to embody the truth, and sometimes the most profound expression of that truth is to say nothing at all. 8. The Stoic's response to insult. Dignity in silence. Few things test the human ego more quickly than insult. A single word, a sneer, a mocking gesture. These can strike like arrows, piercing our pride and awakening the urge to retaliate. Insults carry with them a primal call to action. Defend your name, reclaim your honor, strike back with sharper words. But the Stoic hears a different call, not to react, but to rise above. Epictetus taught, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. The insult may come from another's lips, but the wound, if it opens, is ours." The Stoic understands this. No one can truly offend you without your consent. You alone decide whether the arrow of insult lands or falls harmlessly at your feet. This is not passivity, this is power. Imagine someone hurling insults at you in public, demeaning your work, your values, your very identity. The crowd watches, you feel the fire in your chest, your tongue sharpens, and yet you say nothing. You meet their hostility not with words, but with a gaze of composure, not with defense, but with unshaken presence. To many, this silence may look like weakness, but to the Stoic, it is the highest form of strength. The refusal to let another person dictate your emotional state. You remain master of yourself. That is the only victory that matters. Mahatma Gandhi, though not Stoic by name, lived this principle. Insulted, imprisoned, beaten, he did not respond with rage. His silence was not surrender, it was a strategy. It made the oppressor look smaller and the principles stand taller. His restraint inspired revolutions, his quiet spoke louder than armies. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. This is not a denial of reality, but a mastery over it. You choose your interpretation, you decide what defines you, not their words, not their tone, only your response. So how does the Stoic prepare for insults? He practices inner detachment. He separates his identity from others' opinions. He sharpens his understanding that insult reveals more about the speaker than the target. A wise man, after all, does not bark at every dog that barks at him. He walks on. The Stoic also knows the cost of reaction. A single moment of anger can undo years of character. A careless comeback can ignite a fire that burns more than just bridges. It can scorch your peace. And peace, to the Stoic, is sacred. So what does he do instead? He breathes. He observes. He allows the insult to hang in the air, unanswered where it loses its momentum, its force, its intended sting. In that silence, there is a message. Your words cannot reach me. I do not trade in that currency. And if a response is ever needed, it is calm, precise, measured, not for revenge, but for clarity, not for ego, but for truth. Ask yourself, when was the last time you were insulted? Did your reply bring peace or prolong the wound? What might have happened had you said nothing and simply walked on with your dignity intact? The Stoic knows it is better to be quietly respected than loudly reactive. His silence is not emptiness. It is the fullness of a soul that cannot be shaken by shallow voices. Let them insult, let them provoke. You, the Stoic, remain unmoved, rooted in principle, guided by reason, elevated by restraint. For in a world where everyone feels entitled to speak, the man who can remain silent when it matters most commands the deepest respect. 9. Silent strength against injustice. Injustice stings not only because it is wrong, but because it wounds something sacred within us, our sense of order, our belief in fairness, our hope that truth will be recognized without force. Whether we face it in the form of betrayal, corruption, discrimination, or cold indifference, injustice strikes at the soul and demands a response. And yet, the Stoic teaches us that not every reaction is strength. Sometimes it is noise. True strength often speaks in silence. To respond to injustice as a Stoic is not to ignore it, nor to accept it passively. It is to master yourself before confronting the world. It is to pause, not in fear but in discipline. As Epictetus reminds us, bear and forbear, that is, endure what must be endured, and restrain what must be restrained, not because you are weak, but because you are focused. Consider the example of Nelson Mandela. For 27 years he endured the brutality of a system built to dehumanize him. He was locked away, silenced, forgotten by many. Yet when he emerged, he did not shout for vengeance. He did not return insult for insult. His silence over the years had not been a void. It had been an incubation of principle. And when he finally spoke, his words rebuilt a nation. This is the Stoic way, not to remain silent out of resignation, but to choose silence as a preparation for meaningful, intentional action. When injustice finds you, when you are falsely accused, unfairly judged, or treated with cruelty, you may feel the urge to lash out, to shout your truth into the void. But ask yourself, will your reaction serve justice or merely your emotion? Marcus Aurelius, no stranger to power or politics, wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This is more than moral advice, it is tactical. If you respond to injustice with fury, you become shaped by the very thing you oppose. But if you respond with patience, clarity, and principle, you retain your form, and with time, your presence becomes its own quiet resistance. Injustice feeds on chaos. It thrives when it can provoke disorder, draw its victims into reactive spirals, and paint them as unstable. But the Stoic does not give it that satisfaction. He remains rooted. He chooses not to descend to the level of the unjust, but to rise above them through silent endurance and purposeful action. This does not mean inaction. Stoicism does not teach cowardice. It teaches clarity. The wise man will speak when it is time. He will act when the action is just. But he does so not out of rage, but out of reason. Not to be seen, but to be effective. Imagine standing in front of an unjust accusation. Imagine being denied what is rightfully yours. In that moment, your silence is not weakness. It is a signal to yourself and to others that your emotions do not own you, that your dignity remains intact, that you are preparing, not retreating. The Stoic knows it is better to be wronged than to do wrong, for injustice may stain your circumstances, but your reaction stains your soul. And so, you wait, you observe, you gather strength, you let your silence speak for you, louder, clearer, deeper than any outburst could. And when you do speak, when you do rise, it is not to defend your ego, but to serve what is right. This is how Stoicism faces injustice, not with surrender but with stillness, not with blindness but with vision, not with retaliation, but with unshakable moral ground. Let others rage, let others scheme, you remain unmoved, like the oak in the storm, and in time, the storm passes but your roots remain. Silence is not the absence of strength, it is often its purest expression. Across these 9 moments, facing insult, injustice, gossip, ignorance, anger, loss, boasting, unfair criticism and rumor, we've seen that silence, when chosen with wisdom, becomes more than a lack of words. It becomes a presence, a force, a shield. The Stoics never taught us to escape the world. They taught us to meet it with clarity, composure and character. And in a world addicted to noise, to urgency, to impulsive reaction, silence becomes rebellion, a radical act of self-control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste time arguing about what a good man should be one. Let your silence reflect that inner commitment. Let it speak when words would betray your peace. Let it hold the line when emotion tempts you to cross it." So the next time the world provokes you, pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this moment calling for a response or for restraint? And then choose not from fear, but from principle. Because the man who rules his tongue reveals he has already ruled his soul. If this message resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who needs the reminder. Leave a comment with the moment that spoke to you most. And if you're walking the Stoic path with us, subscribe for more lessons in timeless wisdom. Until next time, speak less, live deeper,